Well, welcome, Coldwell Banker. Wow, what an appropriate song. I got a lot of fight left in me. This is my fight song. Guys, welcome to day two of Strategies to Sold, our kickoff week. We have a powerhouse day. I promise you, it's going to be an amazing day. I'm Brandon Hines, your Senior Education Manager for Learning and Development for the Central Southeast region. I'm so excited to be your host today as we have a very, very important conversation. But before we do that, let's talk about yesterday. Kate Rossi. Wow, what a way to kick off this week with the incomparable Kate Rossi and my counterpart, David Metton, who really kicked off this week with a bang. So, guys, thank you for doing that. We're giving you a big virtual round of applause. And today, I promise, is going to be just as impactful. And before we get started, guys, remember, if you have questions, put those in the chat, and we're going to have some time at the end with questions and answers with our very, very special guest. Guys, today we're going to continue talking about pricing and motivation, how important it is to have the right price to get that listing sold, right? But the part of that a lot of people don't talk about is what's motivating that seller. In order for us to get to the right price, we have to make sure we understand our seller motivation. And when I say powerhouse, I'm not lying. I have who is the perfect guest to talk about this. I'm talking about an industry icon, a personal mentor of mine. He doesn't know that, but he is a personal mentor of mine. Chris Mygatt is here to talking about what he's learned over all of his years in real estate and how he can help you guys come up with some amazing strategies to get these properties priced right. Chris Mygatt, welcome.
Well, Brandon, thank you very much. It's great to see you. And I'm thinking about Wrecking Ball, the song on just before. I'm thinking, oh no, is this like about the topic we're talking about today, like Wrecking Ball? But then I thought, oh no, he probably thinks like I'm a bull in a china shop. So we'll do our very best to keep this thing really rolling well today. But thank you. I really enjoy being here today.
Oh, Chris, I know it's going to be an amazing conversation. Hey, you know it's going to be great. I got a haircut for you today. I told my barber, you better make sure I look good. I'm talking to Chris Mygatt.
You look fast. You look fast.
Yes. So before we get started, Chris, just tell us a little bit about your career and what makes you the perfect person to talk about this today.
Well, sure. My pleasure. And it's fun to think back about what got me into real estate. And I spent a number of years actually listing and selling real estate. I sold on-site condos for a number of years, then got into real estate, traditional real estate, and found myself in many situations, like all of us on the call today, having to defend price, having to really explore motivation, really understand the nuances of the business. And then I went on to manage a couple of offices, and then spent much of the last 20 years of my career in Colorado, leading our Colorado company. So a broad range of real estate experiences to bring us to our conversation today.
All right. I told you was a powerhouse, an industry icon. So let's jump into this conversation, Chris. We always say, right, that the agent's role in pricing is to really provide the customer, right, the seller with reliable estimates, market insight, and guidance to really help their clients understand really what that price should be. Do you agree with this? In all of your years, do you really agree that that is really the agent's role when it comes to pricing?
I think you're right. And I think that what that demonstrates and establishes that there are a lot of things that we have to be really good at to be successful in this business. And I think it would be appropriate also to sort of, mention the elephant in the room, if you will, this idea that it's really like a tale of two cities. I think you would agree that in the industry right now, we have homes that are selling in a matter of days, hours, in some cases, minutes. And when those homes sell so fast, it sets a stage, or let's just say an expectation that sellers have, that agents have about, hey, I get a listing and then boom, it's going to be gone so fast. It's going to be so easy. It's so much fun. But let me tell you, there are tens of thousands of listings in our markets collectively that have failed to sell. They are on the market for 30 days, for 60, for 90, for 100 days on the marketplace. And this dichotomy creates an incredible stress for our agents and for all agents and for sellers as well, because they have an expectation it'll sell real fast. If it hasn't sold quickly, then all of a sudden the blame game starts and all these things happen. So I just wanted to start the conversation out today to say that if you're one of our many agents that have a property which is, shall I say, being seasoned right now, it hasn't yet sold.
I like that.
Hear this loud and clear. You are not alone. There are a lot of people in a similar situation, and it doesn't necessarily reflect anything that you're doing or not doing, or the market is doing or not doing. It's part of the reality. And that's why today's conversation and this week's conversation is so vitally important. You're at the right place at the right time to really explore what we can do to begin to move that needle and unleash those frozen assets.
Oh, wow. Well said. All right, so let's start talking about that. Let's start talking about some strategies. But before we get into some specific strategies, what does pricing strategy really mean? We hear that all the time, right?
Right.
Is it just
Right.
a buzzword, Chris? But really, what does pricing strategy really mean?
So I always think of this triangle, right? This pricing triangle, and there are really three different elements that fall into this. And first of all, of course, you have the price that you take the property to market at. But then the other corner of the triangle has to do with the actual motivation of the seller. And we find very quickly that there's a lot going on when it comes to this actual motivation. And motivation comes in some different ways, right? It can be what a seller feels like the home really needs to sell for. It Don't underestimate the ego of a seller. You've got neighbors in the neighborhood and they want to be the one that had the highest possible price, right? And that's something we have to overcome, and that's done through conversation. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But that third leg of the triangle, that third side of the triangle, has to do with the condition of the property and what we can be doing with that condition of the property to make it maybe enhance that. That's a great, like, real vitalized strategy, but there are different ways. But it's understanding those three things really make up that overall pricing strategy. If you leave one of them out, you find yourself disconnecting with, from a relationship standpoint, to the consumer, oftentimes the seller, or getting really frustrated.
Right, right. So let's stay on this idea of strategy. I always believe that it's best to improve your odds, right? Whenever you're doing anything, let's improve your odds. I want to go into the situation with the best odds. So I believe in doing your homework, planning your presentation, and when possible, meeting in person with that seller, kind of keeping it conversational and also using some visuals. Do you consider those techniques to be part of an agent's strategies? And if so, what tips can you provide to assist an agent in accomplishing this?
Yeah, some tips around just that, and you hit a couple of them. I think the one piece is, how do you stay in relationship with a consumer? And obviously, this past year has been incredibly challenging, and it's forced us to utilize different technologies. And I think many of us have leveraged things like Teams or Zoom or FaceTime to be able to stay in connection with that consumer, but realize that that's just a piece of it. And now that we're coming out of this difficult time, getting in the car, driving over, being in front of that consumer is vitally important in building that relationship that is so important. But then moving beyond that, it's taking the time to be prepared. I think one of the biggest misses that we have in this industry is that we oftentimes fly by the seat of our pants, because we can and because we get accustomed to that. But this is not the time to be doing that. When it comes to pricing, whether it's going back and getting a price improvement, as we call it, not a price reduction, a price improvement, or whether it's pricing it originally. It's critical, I think, to be in front of the people and be prepared with the information. And we've got such great resources, right? So whether it's Market Quest, whether it's utilizing resources and tools like Prospect Square, right, for all of our market and area reports, really understanding your MLS system. I'm not talking about going in and looking at a property, showing properties. I'm talking about going in and being able to pull the data that your MLS has available to you to really be that expert. You see, Brandon, I think that so much of this, the question you just asked, such a good question, is anchored in us becoming the expert. That means we know the market, we know pricing, we know what's happening trend-wise. We're not making it up. We're not going just by intuition. We're using the data that we have available to us to set a different stage for the consumer. It takes some of that pressure off of our shoulders as well.
Yeah, that actually leads right into my next question. This idea of speaking the language, right? We have to speak the language that matter most to our sellers. Average days on market, sell to list price ratios, available inventory. What have you found over the years? Do you have any techniques that you have found that you can demonstrate, right, your knowledge without really intimidating that seller?
Yeah, it's such a good point. It's how do you establish your skill and your knowledge? How do you convey that skill and knowledge? But how do you do it in a way that is not offensive or doesn't feel demeaning or degrading? How do you do it in a way that is educational, right? That is supportive to help someone become better, become stronger. We've always found that when you have a seller that becomes educated, they become your very best partner. It's usually sellers who we haven't taken the time to educate that inadvertently sometimes become an adversarial. And that's not our goal. So what I find is if you discover yourself getting in more of an adversarial situation with your seller, it probably means you need to step back 2 or 3 steps, go back into education, go back into learning, helping them understand why we're reaching some of our conclusions. But again, utilizing those tools and making sure when you come to that meeting, you've got your printouts, you've got detail printouts. I always say if you think you want to bring 10 things, bring 20. Bring
Love
20
it.
documents to support your position, because what you find is you might have a situation where a seller goes, well, yeah, but I don't understand that, or I don't believe that, or that doesn't make sense to me. And you want to have in your repertoire information that goes further down the line. That might be a full detail page on a comp versus just the line item or just a thumbnail comp, those types of things.
Awesome. So, Chris, let's stay on this topic of pricing for another couple of minutes. Give us some best strategies and tips that you've learned in your illustrious career. Give us some of your top 3 or 4 tips that you have when it comes to pricing.
I'm going to give you a disc. I've got like 5 or 6 things off the top of my head that were really my mainstay. And if they weren't my mainstay, they're things I learned along the way that I've heard from other agents who are really successful, other managers that are training our learning team. The first thing, number one, oh my gosh, get the seller in your car. And what I mean by that is, as you're looking at your pricing of the property, subject property, sometimes it's really hard for a seller to be able to get an idea of what their competition is, but their competition is so important. So get them in the car or meet them at the property, show them 3 or 4 homes in the neighborhood at similar price points so they begin to go, oh, now I understand what I'm getting up against. Number one, get them in your car. Number two, the weekly update. Listen, NAR will tell us time and time again that one of the biggest fails that we have in the industry is we don't stay in relationship with our sellers. So number two is make sure, without fail, that you connect with your seller every single week. Pick a day of the week, pick a time, set it up the first time you meet your seller, and stick to that. If it's in person, great. If it's on the phone, that's fine. If it's Zoom, whatever it is, but never miss that. It's that staying in relationship that gets you through the tough times when you've got to ask for that price improvement. Number three, pull together your what I call your perfect pricing posse. Like, this is your group of people that if you've got a home on the market for, let's say it's been on for in our market today, maybe 35, 45 days, get a couple of other agents out of your office, bring them over to the property, grab your lender, maybe grab your manager, have them go through the property with you and make it fun. Get the feedback from them that you can share with your seller on where the pricing needs to be. Play the what will your home sell? What will this home sell for game, where everybody puts a piece of paper, back of the business card, what they think it'll actually close for. Put them all in a little hat or an envelope you got with you, your 5 people, for 2 reasons. One, you're going to use that as a tool with your seller, but then it's also have a prize at the end. Next thing, number 4, listing concierge. I got to tell you, I mean, it's like no big surprise, but if you are not using listing concierge, then it gives you the opportunity to come back in day 35, day 40 and say, listen, I'm going to make an enhanced investment in your property. We're going to get your home on TV. We're going to get it in print publications. We're going to double up on the direct mail. In exchange for that, this is a great time to make sure you really have the right price on the property. Number 4, stay ahead of your expiration dates. Do never let the property expire. Like, you want to find out when you're doing your updates that your listing just expired. You got 30 days ahead of expiration date is when you want to be sitting down renewing that listing. 30 days before, not when it expires. And the last little tip that I've seen that worked out, that I'm seeing this work out so well, is Real Vitalize. Remember the triangle: price, motivation, condition. If that condition isn't where it needs to be and the seller is unwilling to move the price, use this opportunity to go in and stage the home, change out the appliances, put in new countertops, clean up the landscaping, freshen it up the way any retailer would freshen up their window.
Oh gosh, love those tips. And speaking of Real Vitalize, since you mentioned it, guys, there's a huge incentive for the sellers now to the end of June, $200 credit if you use Real Vitalize. And tomorrow we're going to actually have an amazing agent, Rose Scalar, who's going to talk about how Real Vitalize is taking her business to the next level. So Chris, just a couple of minutes here. I do want to switch gears and talk about
Yeah.
motivation. I always think about price conversations in two parts: the data, which is how we
Yeah.
come to decision of what the price is. But the second piece is really that relationship that you build, and that's going to help uncover the motivation. So I look at that relationship as, what type of questions are you asking the seller? Are you really discovering their needs and kind of guiding them through the process? What techniques, really quick, have you found over the years that really help you to uncover that seller's motivation so you can really get to the right place?
Yeah. So you've hit on the $1 million question, right? It's price is fairly mechanical. Condition is fairly mechanical. Motivation, whole different game. This is when you got to pull
Yeah.
out your psychologist hat, right? And you have those delicious conversations, because motivation, we make a lot of assumptions as real estate professionals. We assume certain things. For example, we assume that the motivation of the seller, my seller today, is to get the highest possible price. That can be one of the biggest missteps we ever make in this industry, right? It's by asking questions. It's about discovering what a seller intends to do when they get their home sold, what they want to do going forward. That we learn that maybe what's really important is getting this home sold now so they can move on to the next step of their life. It's in those conversations that you discover what the real motivation is. That we call it the story behind the story, right? What's really happening. But you can't do that at 30,000 feet. You can't do that if you're skimming across the top, moving between transaction and transaction. And this is probably one of the biggest arts of our top producing agents, but it's also probably one of our biggest overlooks for our top producing agents. Like Brandon, you were telling me before a call today, fascinating data, that of our 7,000 listings that have been in the market over 90 days here at CBR, 72% of those listings are held by our first quartile agents, our most successful agents. And in many cases, it's because they've got a lot going on. A lot of things are happening. They're super busy right now. But here's my thought. Take the time to go back into conversation, whether that's sitting down, having coffee, whether that's on a Zoom call, whether it's making one extra conversation, one extra call, and just asking the simple question. Brandon, how's it going? Is it, what find out what's happening in their life that takes you right to motivation. And then that might mean it's time for a reprice or a recondition.
Wow. Didn't I tell you guys this was going to be exciting and so much information? Chris, oh my gosh, you've given us so much information. I want to make sure we get time to hear directly from the agent. So we're going to switch over and do a little bit of Q&A. If you'll stay around and answer some questions for my agents. Chris, that was absolutely
Absolutely.
amazing. I
Best
learn
part.
every time I listen to you. So we're going to turn it over for Q&A. If you have any questions that are in the chat for Chris Mygatt.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And some great comments from the audience so far, Chris and Brandon both. Not a question, but a comment about great tip. Get the seller in the car, and definitely we'll share that in the office here. So loving the
Good.
tips. And then we have a few questions here. So I'll start with this one. How do you deal with the seller who has considerable updates to her house, but the potential buyer disagrees?
So it sounds like you're either in contract, like waiting to close out, or trying to get that first that initial contract. And I think that in many cases, listen, sellers are very proud of their homes, and they should be very proud of their homes. But again, I think it goes back to what we just talked about, which was making sure that your seller really understands what the competition looks like and what they're up against right now. Inevitably, what happens is a home that's maybe 10 years old, or even 8 years old. It's all been redone. And 8 years ago, it's incredible how fast a market can move, how dated 8 years can begin to look. And that's why I think the seller has to decide what's most important to them: getting the highest possible price for their home, or getting the property sold currently in its current condition. Because again, something like Real Vitalize can go in, you throw new appliances in, you throw a new coat of paint on the house, and forget about like my seller can afford to do it themselves. It's not about if they can afford to do it themselves. It's about, do you want to have someone manage the process for you? I know a lot of really wealthy people, they got the money, but they don't want the hassle. Like they just want it done
Yeah.
for them. So again, it's making sure that property is up to date from an appearance standpoint.
Great, great. Melissa, another question.
Yeah, definitely. This one's a little bit longer, so just give me a minute to read it. But what would you recommend in this market where getting people in to make updates takes 3 to 4 weeks or more? I have a home that's been on the market 2 weeks. We discussed doing updates, but the soonest they could get in was in 3 weeks. And I'm trying to get it sold before June when we get more competition. Right now, we are the only one in the neighborhood. I heard Real Vitalize is taking longer as well. Any suggestions?
Oh, so this is a lesson to all of us, right? It's how well can we explain the options to a seller before it hits the market? Because once it hits the market, once it's on the market, and then we discover, oh my gosh, we should redo countertops, we should redo something. It's really awkward, right? Because you don't want to do that work while you're on the market. You want to get it done before. But I'll tell you, I've seen a number of people be courageous. Take the property that has not sold in 30 days, 15 days, or 90 days. Take it off the market. Do the improvements, whatever. It might just be staging. It might be as simple as staging. And then coming back on the market again, making that very definitive decision. Now, yeah, you'll lose June, but you get July. And that's okay. The market is so tight for good property right now, but you only get one first impression. And remember, when you're talking to your sellers about this, one of the comments that I made for years that I still use today when I'm talking to a seller, because I do talk to sellers, it's amazing. I do pop in every now and again. Is this? We'll talk about what the recommendation is. Remember, it's a recommendation. At the end of the recommendation, what I always say is, listen, if this is my recommendation, I may be the expert, but you are the boss, Brendan. What do you want to do? You put it right back. You establish their hierarchy, like they're in charge, but you also get the word in. Hey, although I am the expert, you are the boss, and it sets it nice. Where if they feel like they're in control still, but they hear your message.
Wow. I think we have time for one more question, just one more question, and we have to let him. I know time.
I want to say all day. I love this.
There's Real Vitalize is a hot topic. So Brandon and Chris, maybe, post event, we can go through some of these, but here's a great one that I think: how long should the property be on the market before you bring up price reduction?
Oh, great question.
Ooh, I like that one. And that's, yes, that ever popular price improvement. How long do you wait? So it really depends on your market. And here's what it also depends on. How did you set the stage? How did you set the expectation with the seller? Because I always say that in every initial listing presentation, when you're doing your initial conversation, set the stage for the price improvements in advance. Some agents will actually put it in contract. If we haven't received an offer in 15 days, 20 days, 30 days, then we'll discuss a price improvement. Others just have it verbally. Whatever's more comfortable for you, but you've got to have it at the beginning because you're setting the expectation down the road. In today's market, in quite frankly, many of the markets I've seen across the country, I think if it hasn't actually gone, if you haven't received an offer in the first 15 days, now I'm not talking about a $12.5 million property, I'm talking about the general population of inventory, then it's probably time to at least open up the conversation about a price improvement and why that would be, or changing the condition. It's one of the two. That's all you got to work with, one of the two.
Yep. Oh, wow. I think we can slip in one more question.
Okay, great.
We're one more question because I think there's a burning question in the chat. And then after this, we will wrap it up. But one more question for Chris Mygatt.
Oh, goodness. Now you have to make me choose. So
yes.
This one.
Make it good.
Listen, you're good. You're
right?
good.
I haven't heard any mention of the challenges that existing tenants pose. I think they can potentially sabotage landlords' sales. Any thoughts on that?
Oh my gosh, this is a real topic and a really important topic, and we probably won't have enough time to fully discover it. But you are absolutely right, because here's the dilemma: we have thousands of tenants that, quite frankly, as tough as the real estate sales market is, the real estate rental market is, and they are scared that if the home they are living in now sells, they may not have a place to go. So inadvertently, sometimes they become a big hurdle to us. That's a conversation when you have investor sellers. Before you put the home on the marketplace, I highly, highly recommend that you have a buyout provision. discussed with that seller ahead of time. And in many cases, in fact, in most all cases right now, it behooves the seller ultimately, and I would say the tenant as well, to exercise that move out provision before it goes on the market so you can get it repainted, get it looking its very best with nobody in the property, get it staged. So when you come on the market, you get multiple offers. Listen, here's our goal, folks. We want to have a buyer walk in that house saying this: what will it take to get this property? Versus when a buyer walks into a home and they're saying in their mind, what do you think the seller will take for this property? That's a price going up or a price going down in their mind. It will establish how the seller ends up managing the sale of their property and how much they get. But it goes back to, if you can ever do it, get the tenant out of the property before you get on the marketplace. Now's the time to do that. Homes are selling fast enough. There was a time and place that Brandon knows very well, 2007, 2000. Like, we had to have a tenant because I was going to go into foreclosure.
Yeah.
That is not the situation today. Get the tenant out.
Wow. Well, Chris Mygatt, all I can say is wow. I mean, that was just a jam-packed half hour. You are amazing. I always say this, one of my favorite musical artists of all time was Whitney Houston. Clive Davis used to say that Whitney Houston could actually sing the phone book and make it a hit. And I feel the same way about Chris Mygatt. You can say anything, you can read the phone book, and I would learn something. So thank you so much for your passion around this topic, and thanks so much for being here today. Guys, I told you it was going to be a jam-packed day. It was, with our powerhouse, Chris Mygatt. I hope you guys took away some strategies that will help you move these assets. Come back and join us tomorrow with Rose Scalar, one of our top agents, talking about Real Vitalize. She's going to be talking about that with Angela Sai. I will see you guys later, and thanks so much for joining in the Strategies to Sold Day 2. Let's get them sold.